Okay, test, 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 test. Looks like it's coming through okay. We'll get started in just a moment here. Here we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, I think I'm just gonna jump right in. 1 second. There we go. Okay. So hello everyone. Thank you for stopping by and checking out the stream. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're coming back, hope you've been well. Hope you've had a good week. Thanks for your patience. I've been away for a little bit due to some family stuff. Everything is going just fine. Just needed a little time to travel to help out my family with some stuff, normal stuff. This evening, I'll start off with a brief introduction to the stream for people who are new, kind of recap what we went through last time, and then talk about what our goals are for today. So if you're new here again, welcome. My name is John. I'm a video game developer and Dark Souls fan. I've played through all the games in the series, and I really love how they address I guess what you would call the problems of game design, like how they manage to communicate things to the player through environmental storytelling, through implicit tutorializing, basically how they talk to you through the game. I think they're really, really smart in the ways that they do that. In addition to enjoying the game as a player, I really, really love the ways in which they, as developers, have chosen to bring their game to life, so to speak. So that being said, I wanted to take some time to go through the series and appreciate and try to analyze and study and understand, etc., how the developers maintain their vision, I guess. I guess that sounds a little pretentious, but hopefully that'll make some sense, right? How they go about bringing the game from concept to execution, what went right with that execution, what maybe could have gone better, and also an attempt to address some of the ongoing criticisms about the game. For some reason, the game has recently gotten a surge of commentary on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, both with people who are critical of it and people who are, I guess, more supporting of what it has done and what it has attempted to do as well. And I've been fascinated by seeing the discussion that's kind of come out of that back and forth. On that note, if you're curious to see some of the discussion around the criticism of the game, I would encourage you to check out a channel called Feeble King. Suffice to say, I do not agree with his stance, and just a bit of a trigger warning, some of his videos are a little bit spicy. Or let me be frank, they are kind of sexist, specifically with regards to the Dragon Age Veilguard video. So be aware going in that you may or may not find some of those opinions challenging. But with regards to his Dark Souls 2 critique videos, I find that they're a pretty good overview overall, or like a good representation of what the criticisms are that I've heard thus far, if that makes any sense. Good synopsis of what the like he has his fingers on the pulse, so to speak, of what the problems of the game are in certain people's eyes. And then on the other hand, you have Domo 3000. Domo has been going through an extensive series of examining other people's videos, like Feeble King and like Mahler, and he's been kind of providing an opposite approach, where he's been breaking down some of the issues with some of those critiques and responding to them one by one. So this is an extended tangent for me to say that my hope in presenting the series to y'all and sharing it with y'all is for us to listen, regardless of your own political beliefs or what you might think of the Dark Souls 2 discourse one way or another, is to just kind of go through it together, look at the game, take our time to examine it carefully, and formulate our own opinions on it, and then maybe listen to some of the voices on either side of the discussion and see whether or not we agree with those takes. And so today we're going to be picking up from where we left off last time, which was we went down the gutter and we finished up the run, and we also wrapped up the Iron Keep. And so today we're making our way towards Drangleic Castle, and I'm particularly excited about this because Drangleic Castle is... The approach to Drangleic Castle is something that has created no small amount of controversy in terms of its overall approach to world building, I guess you could say, without spoiling too much. But then also the castle itself is generally viewed as quite well designed, and so it'll be interesting to talk about those things. Quick disclaimer, I am kind of sick. You probably hear it in my voice, so it's probably not going to be as long of a stream, and I apologize if I wind up coughing or kind of being slightly less energetic. gonna try to keep the the pace brisk. But that being said, I might not live up to that this evening, so just giving you a heads up real quick. But I still think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. So just out of curiosity, I probably should spend my souls first, but I wanted to go down here and explore the areas that have been opened up to us by the laddersmith. Keeping in mind that I haven't actually gotten all of that stuff yet. And I was trying to keep in mind the fact that I think it was Matthew Mitosis, it could have been somebody else, who had a concern about the fact that those planks down there look like they might support your weight, but if you fall down on them, they shatter beneath you, and then you die, and some people consider that cheap death. I have to say I disagree, because the idea of there being unstable platforms in a game that could potentially serve as traps or hazards, I think is perfectly fine, and these do look a little bit more ramshackle when you compare them to those that are more sort of evenly spaced out. The logs are kind of spaced out and connected in a way that, to me anyway, looks a little bit more stable. But anyway, if you're going to teach somebody that there are destructible objects that they can land on and that they might want to be careful of that or otherwise suffer the consequences, doing so within like 10 seconds of a bonfire and in a safe area in the hub makes a lot of sense to me. This is something that I absolutely adore about these games. I have no idea, what the symbols are here. I can speculate. We can talk about how it might look like an angelic figure, and we see some other angelic references in this game. And the glyphs in the back kind of look like cave drawings, paintings. That could be a dragon in the middle of the concentric circles there. Not entirely sure. But regardless of how you interpret it, I think this game is really excellent at making very compelling, mysterious, kind of ancient things show up in its world that are there to kind of tantalize you and there to kind of evoke a sense of mystery without necessarily explaining it explicitly. And so even if you never wind up delving into the lore, to me, finding something like this ancient weathered door that's clearly, has a script etched into its surface that implies that it's part of some other dynasty or civilization, especially since, I'd have to go and like map it out, but like it seems like this area probably overlaps with the basement of the where we found the broken lord vessel, or at least is sort of relatively close enough to that location, right? Just I find that super interesting. It makes me wonder about the story and implications of this space. Oh, you can actually climb up on this ladder. I didn't think you could for whatever reason. I thought that you kind of got stuck down here. Yeah. You can pop back up. That's funny. Realizing that I also have a bunch of small, smooth and silky stones to go trade in, so I might try that for a change of pace. Probably gonna fail at this. Again, I was just playing Bloodborne recently, and I don't really love the whole like sprint forward and then snap jump away at the last minute thing. I don't even really know why they decided to put platforming in the games sometime. This doesn't really seem super... Like, I don't feel like I just succeeded in, winning a difficult challenge or whatever that I really practiced and really prepared for. I guess I did. Factually I did do what I am describing, but I didn't feel that way. I feel like I just kind of cheesed the system and got lucky, and that's never a very good feeling. And then this here, you have to be super careful, because I think a lot of players will reasonably think that they can just drop down to where that corpse is, and there was a shiny item there before, too. And if you do that, you'll probably fall off. But anyway, maybe it's just, me personally, maybe it's not a thing that other people share, but I find this whole area very oddly terrifying. The giant gaping hole that leads down to apparently nothingness, but also the signs of ancient civilization that kind of hint at maybe something, not just, a chasm in the earth lying below, but something real, something created, something living that might, underlie all that. Now, I'm curious to see... Okay, so in Dark Souls 1... Oh, yeah. Hold on. Yeah. Let's try that again. I'm sorry, I forgot to give a jump scare warning. Hopefully that wasn't too obnoxious there. But let's try that one more time. listen closely to the sound, then I'll explain. So, I forget the name of the item. I think they might have just been called rainbow stones in Dark Souls 1, but there were stones that you could get that you could drop to leave a little light marker on your pathway, which I think is a smart idea. And, oh, let's see if I can get the fucking thing. Hang on one second, I'll focus on killing this. Yes! Okay, great. I love how they do give you, like, the one little singular soul. But there were little markers that you could use to mark your way, and that would help you navigate through areas and, like, breadcrumbs, identify places you've been to previously. You know, it makes sense. And, when you drop them over a ledge, if you would die, how can I explain? If you were to have, walked off that ledge, and that ledge would have killed you, the, stone would shatter and would make a screaming noise. I don't think that's something that was explicitly mentioned in the item description. It might have been. I think it is in a later game. But basically, it became a way for players to help check ledges to see if they could safely survive a fall from them, which I think is pretty clever. And I like that they include them here. Also, or like kind of bring them back here, rather. I like the fact that I think there is a statement to the effect that they emit a faint sound or something like that, but they don't warn you that it's a scream. So you throw this thing over the edge, and then all of a sudden it just emits this horrifying shriek, and you're like, oh my god, what did I just do? Did I just kill something? It's a nice little kind of jump scare-esque moment. I know I'm using a lot of life gems here, but there is a reason for that I'll explain in just a second. And so, if you listen closely as well, the scream that's made is the same sound as the, if you recall in Anor Londo, or New Londo Ruins, back in Dark Souls 1, there are these ghostly enemies that carry, like a ghostly baby, and when they attack you, they make this horrible wailing screech noise, and that's the same, scream noise, it's just, pitched up a bit. So, kind of cool that From Software find interesting ways to reincorporate assets from previous games. So I don't think I'm going to go back in here for very long. I just kind of wanted to poke my head down here as I was exploring. And I want to go back and check out the trading crows. They had a whole bunch of stuff that we could trade with them. Then we're going to go to Drangleic Castle. I do appreciate, I'm sorry I don't recall your name specifically, I apologize, but I do recall somebody suggesting that we try out some new builds, and I'm definitely interested in doing that, but I think I might do that on another stream, just because, I have a Sublime Bone Dust to burn, just because I want to make sure that I stick to the constraints that I have set, which basically involve me wanting to mostly use melee weapons and a shield, not rely too much on dodging. Excuse me, I'm sorry for the I have a cold noises. Because I want to try to empathize a bit with the players who are finding that they struggle with the game's difficulty, who tend to be coming from a perspective of like a melee build, if that makes sense, right? So I want to experience things the way that they're experiencing them. Yes, it's well and good to say, okay, we'll just use spells or whatever, but not everybody is going to. I want to try to see what that's like.
You are blessed with a myriad of souls. Bearer of the curse, make your way to the castle.
It's very perfunctory, isn't it?
Those who come to Drangleic seeking salvation.
Or back to the initial dialogue.
And turn hollow. It happens to them all, sooner or later. That blue knight at the base of the tower, his spirit is already broken. Although he does offer sound advice.
Okay.
Perhaps he is a foreshadowing of your own future.
I will say that I think it makes a lot of sense for Shadowlot aka the Emerald Herald, to be kind of muted and disaffected and not be particularly interested in what's going on. Minor Undertale spoilers. If you don't want Undertale to be spoiled for you at all, maybe turn off for the next 20 seconds. Undertale spoilers 3, 2, 1. She's kind of like Sans in Undertale, who I think has just been through the cycle so many times that whereas Sans has developed like a kind of gallows humor, chuckle about everything. The Emerald Herald is just like totally disaffected and muted by comparison. But I think also, how many kingdoms has she seen rise and fall? How many supposed monarchs has she seen come and go? At this point, I'm sure she's not particularly impressed by you. Now she's starting to take notice because you've at least managed to gather the souls. But others have done that too. Vendrick did that too. And it didn't solve the world's problems by any means. But that being said, I think if you're the sort of person who really likes charismatic, like outwardly charismatic characters in video games, you're looking for, a Baldur's Gate 3 style experience, for example. So many characters in this game are so like muted and restrained that, especially after just defeating these 4 bosses and essentially advancing the game to the next act, to be rewarded with that by somebody saying like, oh yeah, good job, whatever, Castle, you know the drill, get the fuck out of here. It's like, can I get a little acknowledgement, please? I could totally understand why somebody would be frustrated with that. And it's not like necessarily a fair response for me to say like, oh well, in the deepest lore there's a reason for this. Like, if you don't like this, if you find this kind of character interaction to be unrewarding, that is okay. Like, that is totally legitimate. I disagree. I don't have that same experience, but like, I don't have anything judgy to say about it, I guess, if that makes sense. So, one of the things that I saw come up on other streams, or like people criticizing the game, is Mahler, I think in particular, was saying, try to play the game in this particular way. Whenever you get back to town, essentially, level up and then use whatever remaining souls you have left to use your life gems, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep playing for a while, and I'm going to not spend souls on anything else. I'm just going to spend them on life gems and on leveling up, and to see how that affects my playthrough. And specifically, I'm going to be examining the claim of whether or not I think that breaks the healing system, and whether or not, more specifically, the healing system is objectively broken. Yeah, because that was part of the claim that was made, right? That life gems break the healing system. I've been thinking a lot about the healing system, and my conclusion thus far is that it is not broken by any means. It is calibrated very differently than the system in Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1, you have access to an Estus flask that you can get up to plus 10 very quickly, and reasonably within, especially if you know what you're doing, within a few hours of the game, 10 or 15 hours of the game starting, again, especially if you're experienced, you can get the Rite of Kindling, which lets you go all the way up to 20. I'm 20 hours into this playthrough, 2025, and I only have 7 plus 3, right? So this game just like starts off by providing you far less in terms of your replenishable, non-perishable resources, or whatever you want to call it. And then it provides you with a wider array of tools to choose from. And those tools provide you healing in different ways with different pros and cons. So for example, the Rouge Water will also restore some spells. The charms will also cure poison, but they take longer to cast, right? And then these are total cure-alls, which are extremely rare and precious, as well as you have items like the small, smooth, and silky stones, which can be used for healing, but also could potentially be valuable in other ways. So basically, the game gives you a handful of options and says there are pros and cons to each of these. Some of these things might be wasted on you given your character class or whatever. Figure out which one works best for you, and in order to incentivize you to use a wide variety of tools, we're going to restrict your access to your main healing item to put more, not pressure in a negative way, but to put more incentive on you to experiment. And the fact that the game gives you a character who starts off as an explorer class who has access to an item that helps you find more items. I think it's just trying to nudge you in the direction of like, hey, experiment with more shit, try more shit, you know. Ooh, that's actually cool. Look, I like that. Um, be willing to take chances and to experiment with the options that you have on hand, right? I think that's what they're going for. And I do not think that the healing system is broken as a result by any means. So let's see. I just want to do. I don't know if I'm gonna do like all fucking what 19 of these right now. I just wanted to do a couple. See what we get. Ooh, Channeler's Trident. That's nice. Part of the reason why I wanted to look at this is because I'd heard that I'll do 2 of each. That people found the fact that this was randomized to be very frustrating. We'll see. Twinkling Titanite. I think the benefit of having it be randomized is that you could potentially play the game multiple times over and over again to see what you get. You know, might be frustrating if you don't get the item that you want specifically, but it kind of feels like when you're trading with the bird in or Pumper Rum Pickle Pea crows in Dark Souls 3, for example, that you just kind of go through the sequence, and then when you're done, it's like, okay, there's nothing more here. Whereas these crows, you can always come back and try to get something else. It's a way of giving you a chance at like finding a precious item, even if you have kind of exhausted your like trading chain, so to speak. Which I kind of like, but I can also understand like randomness a lot of times doesn't really feel good, depending on the context. For the reason why I don't like Balatro all that much, but that's a whole other topic. I will say, I feel like the smaller offerings should be giving, like, it's a little bit unbalanced, you know. Feel like getting the trident was good, but some of the other stuff there was like, why am I getting the same exact tier of item from the small ones as the large ones? That felt a little off. Unless the game is just placing different value on them than I am. So, I don't think we need to go through and do the torch minigame unless people really want to. If you go through here and light all the torches, there is a secret NPC that spawns, or NPC invader rather, which I think is a cool detail. Don't know if there's a whole lot of lore to it. I'd have to go and check, but you know, makes sense. Just gives you something else to do. Actually, I should probably keep this open. Now, much chagrin was had, I guess is one way to put it, about this particular NPC, whatchamacallit, petrified NPC over here. And I want to point out that the reason, this is specifically a criticism of Scholar, right? And the reason why it was deemed to be a problem, Scholar, because it doesn't occur in vanilla, this NPC is not here in vanilla, right? Is because the concern is that players will come here and see the petrified dude, and then go get a fragrant branch of yore and come back here and waste it, and then be stuck or something like that. Right? Well, again, this game is like a 60 to 80 hour long game. I think my first playthrough was something like that. I think that's relatively reasonable before getting to the DLCs. And again, I'm at the 25-hour mark, and I've been taking my time and talking with y'all, so could have been going faster. And I just used a fragrant branch of yore. I've used 2 other ones, and I still have 2 in my inventory. So in no way during this playthrough have I felt blocked or hemmed in or anything like that. I think in the first game there were a total of 3 things that you can unblock and 3 fragrant branches of yore or something like that. And there's something like 17, there might even be more than that in Scholar. So they've essentially become an interchangeable key item. And the way to look at it, I think, is it's a lot like a small key in a Zelda dungeon. It's just spread out over the entire world. And I think that's a very good system. You know, you have these precious items that are a rare commodity that you can use at your own pace on the things that you personally think are most valuable, most intriguing, whatever. And sometimes, just like anything, you know, you're going to open a door and there's not going to be much behind there. Sometimes there's going to be something great, but it's not going to be for your character. Sometimes there's going to be something that's thematically cool, but not practically useful, etc., right? Like, I'll take what's behind door number 2. that old kind of game show setup. And I guess I understand why some people might dislike that, but personally I find that it just adds for me. You know, it's just one more thing to kind of create a sense of mystery and encourage you. That's the other thing too, from a practical standpoint. It encourages you to go back and explore previous areas, taking your pace to do so. Let's see. I'm gonna blow my nose real quick before I mess this up. Sorry for the sound effects. Okay. Let's go. Alright, I'm not supposed to use my Estus. Oh, got another shard, that's cool. Oh yeah, so it is. Okay. So see, that's an important bit of context. People criticizing this have said, like, it's a waste to come down here, right? But an Estus shard, especially given how precious they are, is a very valuable thing. I feel like even if you wind up pigeonholing yourself or like kind of restricting the paths that you can take later on as a result of choosing to come here now, you ultimately still got a very valuable item. So it feels like, you know, trading a 1 in 17 or 1 in 20 or however many they are item for a like key item, or a 1 in 10 or 12 permanent highly useful healing item, to me seems like a fair trade. So it's like a guaranteed net positive no matter what. Okay. I do like how simultaneously like threatening and goofy these guys are. The range of my weapon, of course, is terrible. Not all that threatening when you're over-leveled, I guess. It's one of those situations where having literally any kind of ranged option would be useful. I actually do want to try and at least use some of these items in here. Probably a bad idea, but use the poop and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's more fun that way if you experiment with stuff. Throwing knives are actually quite useful. I wasn't expecting that level of damage. The stamina consumption on the shield. Oh, that's right, I haven't upgraded my shield at all. That's the other thing too, like the game seems to be actively encouraging you to experiment with stuff like upgrading your armor and upgrading your shield in a way that wasn't always the case in previous Souls games. Interesting. So he's not always as consumed by like dark energy and with the red eyes as he is at this encounter. So despite being, I think, over-leveled for this beat over here, for this particular fight at this particular time, I mean, I still feel vulnerable. I feel like he could definitely kick my ass if I'm not careful. And there, I'm deliberately trying not to be particularly cautious, and I've just used up 600 souls. He wasn't a big challenge, but I'm over-leveled. I've already fought him a bunch of times, and that's kind of cool. I forgot about that. Your character does a little bit of heavy breathing in their animation after a tough fight. I think people are pretty much well aware of this right now, but this particular coffin over here is really intriguing to me. The only function that it has, as far as I know, is that if you get in it, your character's gender will change, and you'll just get or sex probably is more accurate, and you'll just get a message that says the nature of your being has changed. That's really fascinating. I wonder if anybody ever figured out the lore behind this. I noticed that there is a carved like lion head knocker on the like door knocker. Looks like a lion to me. That could be a gargoyle actually. And then obviously there's these swirling angelic flowing patterns over there. but there's another lion over there as well. You can also look down here and see that there's an individual on a horse. It's kind of part of a procession, but it's very difficult to tell sometimes if there's specific lore there or if those are textures that have been purchased, because they do that sometimes. We were talking about that last stream. Either way, again, regardless of whether or not you ever find out what the specific lore behind all this is, the intrigue that it generates, I think, in and of itself, is a very positive addition to the game. Which I don't think is something that you're going to hear Dark Souls 2 critics really talk about much, because, and I still don't know why. I sort of know why, but like, not to get too deep into it, but I have continued to find that pro Dark Souls 2 people tend to be pretty left-leaning, you know, with Domo coming out, and very ardent and explicit support for trans folks, which I absolutely support as well. And folks on the opposite side of the aisle tend, at least the ones who are most vocally critical on YouTube, not necessarily in life in general, tend to be not as much so. And I wonder, you know, without even like casting any aspersions or anything, I genuinely wonder what their take would be on the fact that this game has a thing that lets you freely switch your gender / sex, and that it's presented in this kind of very peaceful and regal and refined sort of way. I guess I broke my rule buying that Titanite, but it's fine as long as I'm relying on the life gems for healing. So yeah, I just bought some healing items because I didn't have enough to level up now that I came back, and yes, now I am back up to 99 life gems. I have max life gems. That's true. But I also just spent like, what, 6,400 souls? That's like half of a boss soul. You know, that's a couple of extra upgrades from or pieces of upgrade material, something like that, right? That's more consumables, as poison arrows or poison darts that I'm not buying. And that was just from a little foray into an area that was already pretty safe. So I don't consider that to be a sustainable approach for most players. I have to also keep in mind that I'm quite experienced at this game. You know, I don't think I'm very good or whatever, but I do think, you know, it's a fact that I've completed a no bonfire plus no death run and on a single playthrough. And so you can't do that without at least being somewhat familiar with the game, right? And I did use life gems pretty much literally exclusively to get through that run, because you can't use Estus. You get one charge and then you never get to rest at a bonfire again, so it's exclusive with life gems. But that playthrough was still really challenging, because the game, to me anyways, is calibrated around it. Oh, why are you still here? Didn't I give her an outfit?
I'm going back to I hope we can meet.
I guess not. Okay, I'll just give her something real quick. Let's see. I don't want to waste too much time on this, but I want to give her something that is decent that I also won't necessarily regret not having. Let's see. I might want to use the Falconer gloves later. Sure. Those will be fine. I probably won't use this. Okay. Please enjoy this odd assortment of stuff.
I have my very own. His name is Kareem. I was when he set out for Drangleic, but we were separated quite early on, I'm afraid. Thank you so much. I'm very happy for this gift. After I change into this, I'm heading for Majula. I'm not sure where I might find my lord, but perhaps Majula is my best chance.
Probably. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I was wondering why she hadn't showed up yet. Okay. So, yep, about ready to start heading into Drangleic Castle. Oh, hey, Loha, how's it going? Nice to see you. Oh shit, I got ambushed. Gotta watch out. 1 second, sorry. Yeah, how have you been? How's your week been going? So on the one hand, just while I'm doing this, it occurs to me that this could be one of those things that people look at and they're like, oh, Dark Souls 2 is unfair with the ambushes and stuff. And I guess the first time, yeah, but again, like maybe if you decide to come in here, and especially if you're online, you see all the blood stains and you don't pay attention to anything around you, and you're just like, okay, I'm just going to go straight for the lever, then you'll get ambushed. And then what happens after that? Well, you're close to Majula. You come back and you're like, oh shit, I guess they probably came from all around me. I guess I should probably look at my surroundings if I don't want to get ambushed next time, right? So a lot of times when I hear people kind of discuss the moments, the game's cheaper moments, I can sympathize, but then I tend to find that there are ways of learning from the lessons that you're being taught in those moments. Sorry, I gotta get to the habit of muting the microphone when I do that. Okay. Loa says, I assume the sex change thing wouldn't be anything more than a menu thing if the game was made today. I suppose it could be, yeah. I mean, like, regardless of current day politics and all that, I think the fact that the game introduced the concept in a way that is a natural part of the world itself is really cool. And one of Matthew Matosis's criticisms of the game was that, like, you start off as a male character, and then you can only choose to manifest as a female character or male later after you get your first human effigy. And his concern, I think, was that that might alienate some female players, and I get that. I think that's a fair point, but I also think that the game is trying to make it clear that regardless of who your character was before they kind of came into the world, that peering into a human effigy lets them rewrite their identity and become something else. And since the overarching theme of the game, or one of the overarching themes of the game, is the loss of memory, loss of identity, and stuff like that, loss of personality and purpose, the fact that they have left all of that stuff diegetic, the fact that they make you exist for a minute inside the game world before giving you that choice, that they make that choice an active part of a conversation between you and a non-player character, to me I think is a strength of the game. It's not necessarily like a problem with the other games that they don't do that, but I like the fact that the game did that, and then also provides the option to change your gender or sex, whatever they, maybe both, afterwards if you so choose, in a way that also feels like it's a natural part of the game's environment. One thing that I want to try is, let's see. Actually, I want to go back here to talk to Vengarl real quick, but also I always use the same, setup with my rings. Let me try this, and I want to also try this. Okay. Actually, Ring of Blades, I don't think I need this, so let's, yeah, I'm gonna up my physical damage. That's gonna let me take more hits, but I'm also going to explode with one of those rings when I take enough damage, and I think I'll also be retaliating damage towards one of my enemies when I get hit. I'm actually going the wrong way, but that's okay. Lois says, a neat way of looking at it. Never thought about it beyond them just adding flavor, because it could just be that, yeah. I mean, I'll talk much more about this as well once I start talking about the music, but I have found that part of what I like about talking about these games is that they're open to interpretation, I think deliberately so in many cases, and while it's difficult to kind of prove, like, objectively, oh, this is the correct reading of this or that thing, I don't even know if that's really the point most of the time. It's just kind of fun to see what interpretations you can come up with based on your own view of the game. Unlike there's a kind of a contrast with the Naruto debate stuff where, ooh, well, that was a cool effect. The Naruto debate stuff where we're trying to be super precise and find as many very specific, bits of data from data books and stuff like that. Especially when it comes to listening to the soundtrack, when things are a little bit more abstract, there's more room for you to try to speculate about what the intentions were, what the message is that's trying to be conveyed, if that makes sense.
Back again? Well, this is a pleasant surprise. I was born in Feroza, a land in the distant east. When I was born,
Oh, I
we were already mired in
confused
prolonged
myself.
Eventually, our kingdom fell. Our people scattered. I've been a sellsword ever since. All I ever knew was war. And I can imagine no other way to live. What a fool I was.
Okay. Interesting that he sells these apparently in unlimited amounts. Sells corrosive, lightning urns. Take a few of those actually.
Farewell.
On my other playthrough I had beaten his body, or I thought that since we had beaten Seldora that we would have beaten his body too. I forgot they moved it to the castle. Oh, but anyway, yeah, thank you Loha for the comment, I appreciate that. Never claimed that it's the only way to look at it or anything like that, but it's been fun to kind of try to figure things out, I guess, in a different light, coming back to the game after some time away from it. We're gonna look at the options that we have here. I do very much like the Drangleic mail. I think it overall provides, the best ratio of defense to weight and all that for the most part, but I wear it so often in every single playthrough I want to mix things up just a little bit. Back to our friends with the broken animations. Yes, they do get perhaps rightly laughed at quite a bit, but again, I have to kind of sing their praises for what was attempted to be done. I think it's also a nice little detail that they have that shoulder pad, which I guess it's still the case that only on New Game Plus do these characters actually have their falcons. So, they're called falconers. They have falcon crest shields and stuff. And in New Game Plus, they actually have little birds that will sit on their shoulders and fly at you and peck you and attack you. At least I think that's the case. I haven't played New Game Plus in a long time, but I'm still a little bit mystified as to why they decided to make that a New Game Plus only thing, right? Yeah, I don't know if that was intentional, but the way that enemy was sort of slowly walking over to the corpse made it look very much like a player in doing so. Especially if you haven't been here before and there's an item there. That was a nice little check. Did want to try something though real quick. So I think camera auto adjust is on, cinematic effects are on. Toggle auto lock on. Automatically acquire a new target when the locked on target dies. Yes, and auto target. Automatically target an enemy when attacking close range with no lock. Okay, so that it is on. Okay. I actually haven't really noticed that at all. Weird. Let's see, Loha says, regarding the ambush from earlier, I used to be the guy who complains about the cheap moments. I changed my view on it when I started looking at it like dying in an old Mario game. Yeah, I like that. I like that perspective. It's a good way to look at it. I think it's, as a developer, very few developers that I've ever worked with, myself included, ever want to make players upset genuinely. We don't. Yeah, there's some people who like the guy who made Getting Over It or Trap Quest or whatever, where frustration is an active mechanic that they're deliberately cultivating. But I don't think that's ever a deliberate choice, especially for games like these. I think that there is a desire to create meaningful challenge that then yields maybe some frustration, perhaps on a low grade, but the same frustration that you would feel like losing to somebody in a game of chess or something, right? There's always going to be some potential frustration in a loss condition. But then giving you the opportunity to overcome that and then yielding more satisfaction. I think most people, even people who are critics of this game, would agree that that is what they try to do most of the time. And as long as there are enough signs and tells kind of indicating that the game is giving you at least a chance to notice the problem coming up towards you and a chance to defend yourself against it, and at least that feels somewhat fair, then yeah, I think that's reasonable, right? 1 second. Be happy when I get through this cold. So this is I forget if the snakes were here in vanilla. I have to go back and check. But we talked last time about how the 3 snakes represent the 3 kings, with their heads cut off or missing their heads. How silver snakes in this game are used as symbols of avarice, to represent greed. And snakes are also used to represent failed dragons. Like if you want to become a dragon, which for various reasons people in the Souls series seem to want to do, but you are unable to separate yourself from your worldly desires like greed, then you will instead become a snake, and that is generally considered to be a failure, like a failed state. So very kind of interesting to find this here. Very kind of creepy presentation. I like the sort of solemn opening of the doors there. Also kind of cool that we have a bit of a preview, so to speak, to the traveling through the baths that we get in Dark Souls. Good job. Not in Dark Souls, in Bloodborne, right? I don't know if that was intentional or just a coincidence or whatever. Now this is interesting. So this is the DLC area, and I don't have the key to unlock the DLC just yet. But of course, this is kind of hauntingly beautiful and chilling, literally, pun intended. And these things are interesting too because if you don't have the DLC but you want to be summoned into the DLC, you can put your summoning signs down here, and other people can summon you, right, in later areas, which I didn't know about at first. It's a really cool way to let people gain access, a preview access to some content that they might otherwise not be able to get into. I think, are we actually down in the frigid outskirts? Maybe. Cool. So anyway, I think it's a great way to kind of create intrigue for a later game, get you interested in it, a later part of the game, get you interested in it and motivated to maybe chip in with some other players. Notice that your boots do get kind of covered in snow. Also, an area like this has just not been present in the Souls series up to this point. Even Demon Souls didn't have an area that was just like completely engulfed in snow and ice and blizzards and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a shock for a lot of players to touch this and wind up being transported to such a place. Now, again, not a lore expert per se, but I do like that they include these etchings with an ancient looking text on the wall. We have, quote, preview images of some of the important characters. You can see, I think some of this might have been related to concept art or ideas for the original version of the game, which is going to have a much more focused and heavy narrative. It was supposed to have more of a love story, actually, apparently, and be less ambiguous, more focused on named characters, kind of like what Sekiro wound up being, as I understand it. But it's cool. You can kind of see, seems to be a narrative playing out here between the humans and the dragons. This actually seems to be more reminiscent of what happened in the Slumbering City, so I'm not exactly sure why it's here in the Shrine of Winter, but I might be thinking of something else. But it's cool, right? I find this intriguing. And so that does seem to be specifically indicating that there is something about water that connects you to those places. Cool. Yeah, it's got me wondering about this whole story with the dragon. That seems like it would have been sin, but the design doesn't quite fit either. And the aesthetic also looks a little bit more storybook than some of the other things that we see depicted. So, 1 second, I'm gonna blow my nose. Okay. Loha says in Elden Ring, some inscription stuff is just meaningless assets they bought to slap onto pillars, walls. I wonder how much of DS2 is intentional or not. Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think was it Vatividia who pointed this out, that the community were trying to find the explanation behind some of the textures on the walls in Mikola's Halig tree, and or no, what's it called? Elfile, and somebody came up with a really beautiful theory about how the flower represents Melania, and then like the face growing out of the flower represents Mikola or the goddess of Rod or something like that. And then somebody else was like, yeah, maybe that's all true, but then also it's in this texture pack or whatever, or they found that it was from some other art asset. And you know, I think it's weird because you can never really know what the intentions were, I guess, unless you talked to the artists themselves and like got an interview or whatever explaining where the textures came from. It's entirely possible on the one side of the spectrum that they just picked things that they thought looked like aesthetically appropriate, and there's another where they were doing that on the other side of the spectrum, and they also picked something that fit the story, right? So the one that I talked about last time was outside of Ornstein and Smo's boss room in Dark Souls 1, there are these like JPEGs of what look like Roman senators or something like that. And I thought, oh, these must represent certain characters in the Anor Londo Pantheon. And then it turns out that they are literally just pictures from a place called the Galleria degli Uffizi, or Uffizi Gallery or something like that, in Italy. And I went there a few years ago on a little pilgrimage, and I stood in front of them, and yep, it's just like literally you can take a picture with your phone and put it up next to it, and it looks exactly the same. It's the same exact thing. And so you could say, okay, well, maybe they were just looking for something that that looked vaguely, Roman to them, and so they picked these things. But even so, that doesn't invalidate the placement of those art assets, and it also doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't a reason for making that choice, right? Like, they wanted some vaguely Roman looking characters specifically because it does fit the aesthetic of Anor Londo. So I think there's a happy medium in how you interpret stuff like that, right? Where you can maybe not assert like a very specific meaning, but still look for ways in which the developers have tried to use a variety of different tools, some bespoke assets and some harvested assets, I guess you could say. So something I wanted to mention here is that the Dark Souls, Matthew Matos's Dark Souls 2 critique was, I think, the first that kind of started off, like kicked off the DS2 critiques. And something he said that I actually agreed with when I first saw it, and still see the point, is that when you come through here the first time, if you're just exploring, you'll get to the other side over there, and you'll see this kind of pile of rubble, and then you will go to the Shrine of Winter, and the Shrine of Winter will say, no, you're not allowed to come through here. You need to go get the 4 Great Souls or collect 1,000,000 souls. And then when you do that, you come out the other side, and you realize that you could have just walked around. And his quote, I think, was something along the lines of, my immersion was so shattered after this point that it never recovered, and I couldn't take the game seriously again. And I can sympathize with that, because naturally, logically, your character should just be able to, like, I'm not in good shape, but I should be able to, like, jump over this, right? A normal person should have no problem with normal mobility getting over this, let alone somebody who's like slaying demigods. So I get it. I also think though that you could look at it as a kind of bitter joke, and with a certain sense of humor, it's actually kind of hilarious because your character, just like your character in Dark Souls 1, is being sent on this sort of futile mission, right? You're told, oh yeah, go get the great souls, oh yeah, go see the king. But we know by the time we get to Vendrick that it was all kind of a sham. Like, the king is totally broken and shattered, as is the rest of this kingdom. So the idea that we come to this shrine, and the shrine will only accept us if we're powerful enough, only if we're worthy enough, only if we fit all the requirements, and then we'll be worthy enough to, like, go and see the king and enter the kingdom. And yes, we finally made it, and then we're like, oh, that was all for nothing. Like, I could have just walked around. To me, that kind of helps underscore, the level design is underscoring the kind of sense of futility and fatedness of the quest itself. The fact that you could have done this the whole time is kind of the point to me. And I'm not sure how to argue that in a way that feels not objective, but like in a way that's persuasive enough to say, hey, you who dislikes the game because of this, you should actually like the game because of this. I don't know if I could really do that persuasively enough. But I do personally find it very compelling. And also just really, like, again, darkly funny. And then, again, here, so this is another thing that I think will be divisive. One second. For some people, just that the fact that we can see Drangleic Castle over there, and obviously it's murky, you know, there's kind of weird green tinge to the air, green-gray, but there's nothing, it doesn't look like it's raining, right? It's not nighttime, it's just sort of maybe late afternoon, cloudy. And then we walk through this little tunnel, and let's observe what happens. I'm sure you've already know exactly where I'm going with this if you've played the game. But you go through this small tunnel, and all of a sudden it's raining. And now again, if you... I like the little little rain particle effects. I think they're using a similar technique to the particles of the dust motes that are kind of hanging in the air outside of the Naralma area with Techigren. Are there little eye holes in the mask? Kinda little rivets that kind of look like eye holes. But yeah, I like the way that they're handling the little texture effects. They obviously don't really have a fluid physics simulation, but they did try to, you know, apply some textures, have them scattered and playing in a little loop. It's a nice economical kind of creative way of trying to provide some feedback. You can tell also that the water splashes on the floor as well. It's basically just a series of 3 or 4, as far as I can tell, flat textures that are semi-transparent, that are being like generated and quote-unquote played at the character's foot. You know, it's not real fluid simulation. But again, like, it's a clever way of adding a little bit of extra depth and reactivity to the world without having to, you know, develop an entirely new tech. Lohat says, I never killed the lords, I taught my guy the rock smashing. Oh, so that's why the pile of rubble was there to begin with. That makes sense. It's called thinking outside the box. So, I think, largely speaking, you know, to oversimplify it, if you play this game, you're gonna have one of two responses when you come up here. One is, it's actually going to be the same response, but just with a different context, right? And the response is going to be, I just walked through that tunnel from where it wasn't raining to where it is raining. What the fuck? Or it's going to be, I just walked through that tunnel. It wasn't raining before, but it's raining now. What the fuck? You know what I mean? It's either going to be, largely speaking, oversimplifying, but it's largely going to be, this doesn't make sense, and therefore it's broken and it's wrong and it's mistaken, it's bad. Or, this doesn't make sense, why? I'm curious. I'm intrigued. Like, why doesn't it make sense? How is this working? So again, I don't know how to like prove that one, or even if God fucking damn it, I hate those lizards. uh, how to even prove, or even if I should, I don't even think I should try to prove that one way is better than the other or more correct than the other. But what I will say is that I personally, when I came through here, I'm not oblivious to things like that. I noticed the fact that the internal world was different from the external world, and that immediately, yeah, RIP. Yeah. One of these days I'll learn how to kill those fucking things, but it won't be today. So I my personal reaction was immediately like, how can this be? Like, how did this castle get to look like this? This looks impossible. It looks uncanny. The architecture just is so blank and weird and stark, and I don't know. It feels like a color scheme and an aesthetic that just feels almost like out of time. And then the weather, is it like a locked off space? Is it somehow out of sync with the rest of time? Is it like that Doctor Who thing where he hides the TARDIS like 1 millisecond out of sync with the rest of the universe or something like that? I come in here with questions, and those questions drive my experience. And I think sometimes people who dislike the game, how I perceive it, is they come in here with rhetorical questions or with answers to those questions without really asking them, and just assume that this is a problem with the game. And if you apply this logic to other parts of the game, like if you accept with your suspension of disbelief that the game is such is a sort of world where things are a little bit like liminal, things don't quite make sense, the architecture and the reality is warped and distorted, and it's supposed to be a little surreal, it's dreamlike, in other words. If you buy that conceit, then I think things like the elevator ride up to the Iron Keep become less problematic, at least in my opinion. But anyway, I just to say that I strongly disagree with the idea that the transition between non-rainy outer Drangleic and inner rainy Drangleic Castle is a bad thing. I think it's clearly a very deliberate choice, and they're doing some very specific storytelling with it that I really find compelling. Hey, Saria, how's it going? No worries, I appreciate you stopping by. I'm give you a heads up, I have a bit of a cold, so I'm gonna be a little bit more subdued, I think, tonight with my banter. Thank you for the welcome back. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to hang out with you guys last Sunday for the Naruto stream. I am looking forward to finishing up the Brutal Honesty video this Sunday. Hope you've been doing well. How are things on your end? Excuse me.
This castle is isolated.
There we go, see?
But nonetheless, you must forge on. To bring an end to your journey and mine.
So you don't get a whole lot of information. You don't get, a huge lore or exposition dump, but all of a sudden, you know something about the Emerald Herald that you didn't previously. Also, it does look like she's floating over the ground there. That's a little funny. And also, you get just a little bit of a hint that the reason that there is a specific reason why this castle is the way that it is, right? It's isolated. So what does that mean exactly? How does that factor into your journey going forward? Well, we're gonna find out. So I know some people have said that they find this kind of ridiculous. I do think it's a little bit. It's a lot. Oh, that sound effect is gross. That's the intention. Obviously, it's a lot, right? Like, you're coming up on these two massive warriors, and it's a very sort of tight, enclosed space. But, so I don't know if I would necessarily say that this is the most well-designed, intricate combat scenario or whatever. You know, you're facing off against these very chunky lads in a very tight space, and there's not a lot of room to maneuver, and you could potentially get trapped up here. But the idea of having these giant, sort of very imposing, terrifying guards outside of a castle, I think fits very nicely. I'm also not finding that my rings are working super well, so I'll probably cycle them out in a little bit. Saria says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you feel better." Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it'll be a quick thing. I usually get sick like twice a year, like clockwork, with allergies, and I think that's just what it is. So I'm taking the necessary precautions and medications and all that. Try and help speed up the recovery. Yeah, it was a excuse me, it was a short trip overall, but it was nice to just get away and have it be a little quiet, so to speak, and to help out my family as well. Family is important. So I like the way that this encounter is designed. I think it should be quite challenging and quite varied. You know, you're assaulting this castle, and the castle has been kind of isolated from the rest of the world. There's obviously something very significant going on here, or that has gone on here. And so having your entrance to the castle be kind of met with various forms of resistance makes a lot of sense. I think having a ton of enemies kind of come out to assault you also makes sense. This is a bit of a trial, a bit of an ordeal. You should be on your guard in a situation like this. I like the fact that you are encountering enemies that you have seen before, but also enemies that oh, I might have locked myself out. That's cool. Enemies that you've seen before, but also enemies that are now being presented in a bit of a stronger light. So, you know, it's building off of, and by stronger I don't just mean like HP, although, and damage, although that is part of it, but also like sorry. You know, some of them have, yeah, I don't think we've seen the Cyan's Knights do that lightning based attack. We haven't seen the lightning that's been cast, or sorry, the crossbowmen like never used lightning bolts previously. So we have, you know, variations, twists on previous enemies. Loha says, I actually always like the gank encounters. Figuring out how to handle 2 elephant fells in a small phase is fun to me. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, right? It's a pretty unique kind of situation that you're forced to contend with. And you're given, you know, you can always just run back and wait until they, like, retreat. But you can also decide to engage with them on your own terms. You can use range attacks. You can try to poke at them with a longer weapon. I mean, you're going to be facing off against a lot of pretty difficult, like, challenging knight type characters as you go through this level. So it makes sense that you would have one such enemy to kind of to presage that, or if that's the right word for it. Loha says, but besides, you've already learned how to fight big gangsters before this point. Oh yeah, absolutely, especially in Scholar. Oh. I always wonder how people manage to find those without data mining or whatever. Man, I don't even remember those lightning guys. They might have been additions to Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin. I mean, the Cyan Knights, which are these guys in general, were definitely in the first game. In the vanilla version of the game as well. I don't remember if they had lightning attacks. I think because a lot of them have those halberds as well as opposed to the swords. Let's see if this guy does lightning attack with his halberd. Give him a second to try. Oh yeah, he does. That's cool. I'm pretty sure the boss, the Looking Glass Knight, also uses a similar lightning based attack, so it's a nice way of kind of getting you familiar with lightning as a source of a threat, and then giving you plenty of time to think about a potential strategy, how you're going to deal with that. Here we have a relatively interesting and unique NPC in the form of Chancellor Welliger. Don't tend to find a lot of ethereal or ghostly sorts of characters here. But I think his presence does kind of help reinforce the fact that this castle is something different, something apart. You know, a sentient, spectral thing is something new. I guess we did have ghosts in the New Londo ruins in Dark Souls 1, so it's not the first time we've interacted with ghosts per se. But certainly, like, sentient ones that are talking to you directly. Yeah. Saria says data miners explaining how they do what they do. To me, I like your funny words, Magic Man. Yeah, it does seem like they have like a language entirely of their own. I'm genuinely impressed by everything they managed to find, as well as modders. I don't know how if you guys have been following the release of Oblivion Remastered, but that just shadow dropped and has like set the internet on fire. And apparently there are already like dozens of mods out for it, like already, even though the game doesn't had official mod support. Which is crazy. You know, some people just start playing the game for nostalgia or whatever, and then other people just like immediately dive into the code base and figure out how to make it better.
Who are you? And by whose permission do you stand before me? This castle is the domain of King Vendrick. Is your trespass intentional? His Highness. Where has he gone? You are a guest of our castle. I am the Chancellor, Veliger.
Veliger.
Do you seek an audience with my lord, King Vendrick? Unfortunately, His Highness is absent. My lord, the King has... The Queen has taken him.
Interesting. I don't remember him specifically saying that he was taken by the Queen, so let's keep that in mind when we meet her later.
My lord made magnificent findings on souls, an accomplishment for the ages. He vanquished 4 great ones and built his kingdom upon their souls. Our king has watched over this land since ages long ago. King Vendrick, we must fight back, or the giants will take Drangleic.
It's interesting. He seems to think that he is still in a time before the giants took over, like came back and kind of conquered. So maybe he's less of a ghost in the sense that he's dead. Maybe he's more just sort of crossing through the barriers of time or something like that in the way that other phantoms kind of slip through. We see other players kind of crossing into our worlds. So there might be some ambiguity as to his appearance exactly.
The king had a dear queen, a woman of unparalleled beauty. Long ago, the queen came to us, alone, from a faraway land. She warned our lord of the looming threat across the seas, of the giants. The king crossed the ocean and defeated the giants with the queen at his side. The king commandeered their power and created the golems. With the golems, the king created this castle to celebrate victory and to show his love and his gratitude to his queen. The queen brought peace to this land and to her king. A peace so deep, it was like the dark.
I will say that, especially as somebody who kind of struggles with retaining a lot of information all at once, like I like benefit from writing things down, going over things multiple times and stuff like that. Having these NPCs basically spread very, very thin throughout the game and then not being able to repeat their dialogue, I'm glad that the game does this for its own diegetic reasons and for setting like a tone and sowing mystery and stuff like that. But as like if I step outside the actual game environment for a second, I personally find it frustrating that I have to like go look up what he said on a wiki. Like there's no journal entries or I can't like replay what he said. I don't actually want the game to make that change though. Because we do have those resources outside the game that are very kind of lovingly and enthusiastically populated by the community at large. I don't think we need it, and I think it might compromise the quality of the game to do so. But I have had the experience of like just going for hours and hours with receiving no lore, no real information apart from item drops, and then getting this huge dump and then forgetting about it an hour later. Now, that's more my fault than the game's, I suppose, but you could, especially if you're not like a Souls aficionado or whatever the term would be, who's like really, really deep into this stuff hardcore, right? You're just an average player who just wants to pick up this game and enjoy it. Maybe an argument that information could be doled out at a bit of a more even-handed pace, and there could be more reminders kind of scattered throughout, would just help the data, like the story, kind of sink in a bit more. But this is coming from the biased place of somebody who, struggles to kind of retain plot details sometimes. So I'm not the authority here. I just think there's a way to maybe make it a little bit more user friendly.
Is this some sort of a dream? Where am I? What has happened to our castle? Who are you? And by whose permission do you stand before me?
He's quite losing himself, stuck in a time loop or stuck in a dreamlike state, probably similar to what we see of the memories of the giants. So maybe this is a memory of Drangleic Castle. Maybe that is why the way it is. Maybe this whole place is more of a memory than an actual extant physical location. And so on the outside, we see Drangleic Castle as it truly is, but then when we step into it, we see it as a like vague remembrance, what it used to be, something like that. Saria says, yes, I agree. This is something I was glad they changed in some of the Tears of the Kingdom. Oh, yeah. They have it so that you can, if you talk to someone twice, you can press Y. You'll see logs of the entire conversation. Granted, Zelda is more friendly with it, but there are dialogue bits that only happen once, so it helps a lot. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that approach. I remember somebody made a Twitter post or something that blew up and got some negative attention, saying that like the fact that Elden Ring doesn't have a quest log is an accessibility issue, and that FromSoft should be ashamed because they have no care for accessibility for people. And I felt that was a bit too harsh. I sort of blew it off at the time. But honestly, like, I've seen a lot of developers make amazing strides towards adding accessibility features for users, and I feel like Elden Ring is kind of behind the ball in quite a few ways. I would like to see better accessibility features in future From Software games. I think adding an entirely new feature like a quest log or replayable dialogue like Persona 5 has or something like that, where you can just go through the conversation and replay individual lines, is starting to mess with the DNA of the game in a way that maybe is not perfect for the setting. So I wouldn't necessarily require that. But there has to be some kind of happy middle ground, right? That doesn't necessarily require you to pull out a notebook. Although that can be fun, I remember playing Morrowind, and Morrowind like gives zero fucks about there was no like quest markers. If you never played Morrowind, it's a lot like Skyrim. It's the game, it's the third in the Elder Scrolls series, and Skyrim is the fifth, right? So when you get a quest in Morrowind, rather than getting a marker on your map that you then follow, it literally just says, oh yeah, there are some herbs in a like south of a church by a river near an old tree. That's like one of the first quests you get. It's like, go find these herbs. They're one of 7 herbs. They're somewhere near a church, I guess. Look for a river. Good luck. You son of a bitch. And then you just have to go out there into the world and try to use your map and try to look for, context clues and markers and stuff like that, like landmarks, and then draw a little map yourself. So you're usually there with a little pen and paper, kind of trying to figure out where you're going. The game, the physical copy would obviously ship with a physical map, and so when I was a kid, I would like take it out and I would kind of chart my course and be like, okay, I was over here, circle that spot. It was a lot of fun. But also sometimes I just want to fucking boot up Skyrim and whack some Dwemer constructs on the head and then fight a dragon and not worry about doing geography homework just to get to the next level. So again, happy medium, right?
Welcome, visitor. Our guests are treated with honor. This is the way of our castle. Tell me if you should require anything.
His tone changed quite a bit. I like how we get like those little hints at the character's personality through the gestures that they offer. So, remembering that apparently having access to infinite life gems breaks the whole healing system, just keep in mind that right now I have 11,000 souls, and if I wanted to buy some arrows, which would be fun to use, I could buy 100 arrows with that, 100 of this kind of arrow, which wouldn't last all that long, honestly. I could buy 140 of these types of bolts. I could buy this very useful ring with that money. I could also buy one of 2 new interesting weapon types. I might actually buy the flamberge. I think I might have one, but that might be fun to try out, right? I don't have any bleed weapons. Let's see. I have a Zweihander, but I don't have a... I do have a flamberge, okay. So, a flamberge, I think. Sorry, yeah, for the for butchering the French pronunciation. Yeah, I might try some other weapons. You know, I think I'd like to try a spear or something at some point. With a whip that I could try out. So, oh, and the twin blade is something else I could try out, right? So,
Welcome, our guest. Tell me,
in order to upgrade,
he vanquished our king, King Vanquish.
sorry, in order to do that, I would need to actually, experiment and try things how I like them, and be willing to allocate souls that I would otherwise be spending on just the life gems. So let's see how far that gets me here. Saria says, this is actually something I accidentally did as a kid. I played through the entirety of Wind Waker not understanding if you feed the fish, they fix your map. Oh, that's right. So I drew the entire map as I found islands. Oh, yeah. Honestly, that pronunciation wasn't all that far off. Okay, that's good. Feel redeemed. Yeah, that's right. Those little fish, they clue you into different locations, right? I was like those little guys. Oh, that's another thing. I remember, was it Beetle who, like, if you get all of his loyalty points, or I'm not remembering, what it's called. Like, you fill out his loyalty card. He's like, I'll give you a big reward at the end of it, and then the thing you get is just him literally saying thank you. It was so fucking funny. I was so mad, but I was so, like, impressed in a way that the game had done that. I do also like the this mechanic of things potentially turning from stone to attack you. You have to be careful, and you're not sure which of the statues might kind of depetrify. And also the possibility that the game might, like, spring a trap on you if you're not careful. Cool mechanic. You can also kind of get the drop on them like that. If you know that they're going to depetrify, their hitbox actually turns on before they start animating. So. Hetsu's, Saria says, honestly, I'd rather get Beetle's thank you than Hetsu's poop. Oh, is that what you get if you do all the, like, 900 Koroks or whatnot? I never got that far. I didn't mention it before I kind of got, sidetracked, but outside of the castle, you also get access to, you get, like, a flame seed and a pyromancy, I think, which is interesting. The flame seed and the pyromancy were placed in a rather conspicuous location, but also, you know, kind of kept in a chest right outside the keep. Kind of seems to imply that that somebody was either keeping it there to either storm the castle, or one of the defenders of the castle was going to use it. That latter explanation doesn't necessarily make much sense, though. I don't think Vendrick was much of a fan of pyromancers. And this is so great too. Like, this is such a Resident Evil style moment where now you've started to become aware that any of these things can potentially be enemies, but you're like, okay, which one is it going to be? Is it going to be that one, right? Are they all going to ambush me at the end? Nice little way of building tension, and of course they have you in total darkness when that happens, which is great. Bonfire here, I think, feels very fairly placed. I mean, we've been going for a little while now. You know, we've had a couple of decently powerful enemies and strong encounters and all that, but we're now getting a chance to rest up at a central bonfire that is going to be one that's used multiple times over the course of exploring this castle. It's a very well placed bonfire, I think. I think there's only one other one in here. It might have been even cooler if there was, oh, hello, even just the one, or only just the one, but still, pretty cool. Oh, I'll be glad when I'm through this. Oh, I think I'm going to continue with that particular battle axe because that's what I've been using so far. Next time I might upgrade a couple more things off screen and play around with them and just kind of try things out for some variety. I'll keep kind of going for now though. I think probably most players, not all, of course, but most players will probably come in here and see this like massive array of potential enemies and be intimidated and turn around and then come back down here and see this particular gate or doorway rather, and we'll probably have seen this imagery before, right? Because there was one in the Forest of Fallen Giants. That message appears as well. I think there's another one outside Aldier's Keep, which we've probably seen. And so I like the way that this is kind of hinting that, like, okay, you're approaching a point in the game where you're going to get an item or something to help you access all these places that have been barred to you, and then maybe you get to do a victory lap after all that. I like the fact that these knights over here also look a lot like the ones that are populating Hade, and I think they are literally the same. So that creates a nice little thematic connection, possibly like a lore connection between Drangleic and them, and Hade. And I think kind of depicts, you know, Vendrick as, you know, a pretty maybe brutal or I guess what's the right word? He's a sort of figure like a Roman emperor who goes around and conquers countries, but then doesn't just like eradicate their people, right? He actually incorporates some of the things from their countries and their cultures and histories that are powerful and worthwhile, and he has a good eye for pointing that out, or for seeing things that are going to be worth incorporating. So he takes different forms of metal, different forms of like combatants and armor. He still allows like religion to have its place, even though he doesn't really have much respect for it, you know? So I will say it definitely feels comforting in a way to have so many life gems. But remember, like I spent something like 8,000, 6,000 souls to top off my life gems previously, and I've already burned through 20 of them in the past half an hour or so. So I am hemorrhaging souls by not using my Estus Flask. Dark Souls 2, the official account of Dark Souls 2 stopped by. Hello, Dark Souls 2. I'm a big fan of yours, actually. Big fan. Thank you for existing, and thank you for stopping by. The king stole the power of the giants. Yes, that's true. We just spoke with Chancellor Welliger, who, or was it Veliger, who informed us as to Nashandra's prompting Drangleic, Vendrick, to set forth from Drangleic and go to the land of the giants. I still find the giant's kinship to be such a kind of perplexing item, but a very, very cool concept as well. Well, the spirit of Dark Souls 2 has manifested in chat like a soul going into a golem, and is here to reveal its nature to us. Which I'm very appreciative of. No, I'm serious. Dark Souls 2, I'm getting a little personal here, I guess, but it came out right around the time when I lost my job, like the company that I was working for, like everybody was let go all at once, and it was a real big surprise, not in a good way. And the upshot of that was basically like I had a month or so to figure out what I was going to do next. And over the course of that month, I just, thought about stuff and prepared for the next phase of my life and talked to family and stuff about what to do next and played a lot of Dark Souls 2. And maybe I'm somewhat biased by the fact that it was quote unquote there for me in an emotional moment or something like that. But I think the fact that it was able to, kind of fully pull me in and like give me a space to explore and focus on in that time was really, really valuable. And then kind of the first YouTube video that I ever made was a Dark Souls 2 lore video, and that kind of got me interested in video editing. And so if I hadn't ever picked up Dark Souls 2, I probably wouldn't have, gotten into YouTube stuff in general. Not to mention that it just further solidified my love of the Souls series, and with that fact in mind, it led me to then get into Bloodborne, which I might not have otherwise. Bloodborne is a masterpiece that also, I think has made me a better, game developer, has helped me appreciate media more, because of, this is a long tangent, I know, but because of Bloodborne, I also started reading H.P. Lovecraft and getting more into science fiction and sci-fi horror, and of course oh shit, did I at least get her? Yeah, I got her. Okay. And of course learning about again, this is a weird spiral, but learning about H.P. Lovecraft and then being oh, this guy was actually really racist. What the fuck? I wasn't expecting that. But then that kind of got me into learning more about American history, funny enough. And then coming back to Dark Souls 2 over the years has just been such a treat because I'm getting my ass kicked though. It's just been really fascinating to see how the things that I appreciate and understand about the game have changed over the years, and the way that I'm able to kind of interact with it now after all this time is, I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but oh yeah, that jump scare over there, I got a little distracted. Basically what I was trying to say is that I got a lot out of the game initially, both because of how awesome it was and also for it being a source of comfort at that time in my life. But then also as I've learned more and more about games and game design and spend more time making games, I just come to appreciate it much more as a developer as well. And I'm really glad that it exists. So thank you, Dark Souls 2. Interesting, we get the frozen flower here on a skeleton of all things. Let's see. I hear those guys scuffling around out there. A stone ornament shaped like a flower, cold enough to dampen the greatest heat. Opens the door to a new path from the Shrine of Winter. Okay, so that's interesting, right? The initial one sec. The Shrine of Winter itself seemed to have quite a bit of narrative going on surrounding the some regal looking figures and a dragon and all that, and that now has been been supplemented by the inclusion of this. Okay, 1 sec, I gotta focus. So now the inclusion of the flower here just makes me think that okay, the Shrine of Winter itself and Drangleic Castle must have a more intimate connection, right? I'm genuinely really curious about why that particular skeleton here has that particular key, right? And having gone to Eliam Lois before makes me genuinely really curious to find out more about what that connection is. Also, finding it in a room here with dark arrows of all things and all these statues, I think the idea here is that at least some of these statues are completely devoid of life and Vendrick built them like this armor right over here, and the armor of the Ruined Sentinels with souls to empower them, whereas others are his own men that have been essentially turned into stone to be kept as golems. So it's interesting. On the one hand, he is taking non-life and forcing life into it, whereas on the other hand, he is taking the living and kind of depriving them of life, like turning them inanimate. He really is just kind of fucking with the concept of animation in and of itself, in kind of a dark way. But but all of the creations, they're not grotesque, right? Like, there's something genuinely pretty beautiful and elegant and graceful, if somewhat terrifying and inhuman, about the Ruined Sentinels. I think the same thing would apply to the Cyan Knights and the sort of Horse Knights as well, whatever they're called. Oh, hey, Konakun, how's it going? It's good to see you. Sorry I missed you guys last Sunday, but hopefully you had a good weekend. You still, have you made it all the way through Jellyfish Can't Swim at Night? Or did you already finish that series? Still haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but it's on my list. So one thing I will say is that I do find I find this room pretty tedious. You know, like, granted, you don't have to fight all these enemies, and you don't have to fight them all at once. You certainly don't have to fight them all at once with like a dumb axe that you get within the first 3 hours of the game. You're allowed to use more weapons and tools and stuff. I'm playing very, very basically right now. So that walk animation is a little silly, the kind of like teeter-tottering left and right. But I will say, you know, after a certain point, it's like, it's really easy to get yourself into a situation where you make a couple of little mistakes, you get cornered, and you have to do everything all over again. Right? And after a certain point, it's just not all that much fun to fight the same enemies time and time again in close quarters. I'm not having a ton of fun actually engaging with these enemies. It's more of an endurance test, and I guess especially if you do have, you know, a ton of life gems, the endurance factor becomes less compelling. So yeah, I don't know. After a certain time, I kind of do want to just kind of get back to exploring, and I can understand why somebody would perhaps just want to cut to the chase, so to speak, after a little while. But that being said, you know, it's still a very interesting sort of area. All these doors that are sealed behind things, or all these kind of sealed doors that you have to defeat souls to gain access to. You're choosing the pace at which to unlock these doors. You, as a player, understand that every time you do so, there may be a consequence. You need to like read the room and figure out when it's an appropriate time to actually make that attempt, and that every time you do, you know, you could be making things harder for yourself. So it's I guess an interesting way of bringing the world itself to light, and it's also kind of fun that you can actively plan to use the enemies as tools to open up new passageways and all that. Like, I know that I have to kill this guy in order to open up the next path, and so I'm going to sort of plan tactically to try to have her be, I think the Ruined Sentinels are supposed to be female, I might be mistaken, but be nearby the thing I want to destroy. And I have two of them, and now I have two enemies, so now I have to be careful about my positioning and bait them out and not kill them unless they're close enough to the doors to open them up, understanding that there might be yet another enemy behind that. So like a nice little kind of dance here. I'm trying to figure out the best time to do everything, and they can move very, very fast in short bursts. So that's another thing that I don't always understand, is that people say that this game is like so slow, and yeah, I guess when you factor in stuff like adaptability, there are parts of it that feel slow, especially early on in the game. But there are moments where enemies can really rush you down. I do see some new comments. I will respond as soon as I deal with this guy. Sorry to keep you guys waiting. Just, sometimes the multitasking is challenging in this game. Something I want to look at too is getting an overlay for chat to put it on the screen. Right now it's sort of off to the side, so it's not quite as easy to respond quickly. Yeah, okay. But let's see. Konakun says, well, my PhD in Sailor Moon is complete, and I can say first 14 chapters, Sailor Moon solos Goku and not joking. Really? I didn't know that they scaled that high. That's kind of surprising, but also kind of not, given that they have, like, cosmic powers, right? I think I heard recently that somebody say, like, Sailor Moon was, like, universal or something. So I'm curious, is this a new Sailor Moon adaptation or something that's come out? Because I feel like I've heard more people mention Sailor Moon recently for whatever reason. Oh, hi. Or is it like you're going back and rereading old chapters or something like that? Either way, that's cool. Let's see. Konakun then says, do you know my top 3 animal goals are KKK? It's a good thing I'm not. Excuse me. You had my heart jump into my chest for a second there. I was wondering where you were gonna go with that. But that's okay with me. That's the best pun I got for you right now. Hope that'll do. It's OKKK with me. Let's see. Sorry, it says I know you're sick, but your commentary is still very relaxing. Oh, thank you. I'm really glad. I get a little self-conscious about my voice, especially if it's like raspy like this. But so I'm really glad that you're finding it enjoyable. Appreciate that. What else? Oh shit! What the hell? That sound scared me. Let's see. Oh, Konata, Kaori, and Kaguya. Kaguya is an interesting choice. I actually want to hear more about what you think about Kaguya as a character, because I feel like she's pretty underappreciated in the Naruto community, right? Are you a fan of her as a character overall? Do you think she has good presence in the story and all that? I like this armor set a lot, actually. There's some, I think there's a fan theory suggesting that Faram is the name of the nameless king from Dark Souls 3. It's Gwyn's son, who came here and has a presence in this world. Konakun says, look at this photograph. My girlfriend's so ugly, it makes me laugh. Oh no. How did her eyes get so big? I'm starting to think it's just a dude in a wig. You know, I don't know, depending on your tastes, that could actually be could be a bonus, you know? Not here to... Oh, what was the line a friend of mine said? I'm not gonna yuck anyone's yum. Just like, you know, a good philosophy to have. Sailor Moon's, can anything you want? She's omnipotent. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Oh, so that leads to the question, if she's omnipotent, then how does she have a sense of challenge in the series, if she can just like beat anybody? I guess Superman is kind of omnipotent, and so is Saitama, right, is omnipotent, sort of. At least he's presented as borderline omnipotent in season 1, from what I recall, of One Punch Man. But obviously still a compelling story despite that fact. I just realized I just did that like twice in a row. Hang on.
Young undead, don't let this curse weigh upon you. We meet a second time. Perhaps you will yet traverse the dark. Young undead, if you truly seek the dark, then we will surely meet again.
Yeah, so this is intriguing. Without even delving into the lore too much, you know, we have this individual that we've seen before in a relatively prominent location, but there's still like somewhat hidden, sort of underground. But this is like, there's no reason, there literally is no logical reason why he should be here, right? He's in a wheelchair. If he were to have come down here from the way that we did, falling through the ceiling over there, then, you know, the ceiling would be broken and the door would be open as well. So it really does add like an extra layer of the impossible nature, the uncanny nature of this space, which I think is really cool. Kind of also implies two additional things. One is that he's traveling through the dark, you know, that there is another layer of reality, level of reality, dimension or something that people can travel through. And also, you know, we have mentions by Chancellor Veliger that there is something about the peace that the queen brought to the kingdom that was like the dark, and now there's this implication that the dark is under the castle. But isn't that interesting that it's being described as something that is peaceful, right? Even though the darkness is kind of terrifying and scary and has horrible nightmarish things in it to a certain extent, it is also something that's described as like sometimes warm, sometimes cool, generally comforting, generally something that is associated with strong emotions sometimes, but also those emotions can be emotions of comfort and love and respite. And so, yeah, it's kind of telling about the game's lore that it portrays darkness in that way. You know, if the fantasy trope being that like dark equals bad is not exactly what's going on here. Granted, you could just say, oh yeah, sure, Nashandra equals bad. But I think there's more to it than that. Oh. I do want to start moving up to using a sword, because I find that while the axe is decently versatile, it's not quite as fast, and more to the point, the reach on it is not as long as I'd like. And that's why stuff like that happens. Keep in mind also that over the course of the past hour or so, I'm now down to half my life gems. And also that the life gems aren't an instant heal in combat, right? Like, they take a long time to heal. If I'm at very low health, right? Let me take another hit if Sentinel operates here. Okay. If I take one more hit, okay, and I really need to heal really quickly, it'd be a bad idea for me to use a life gem. If I use my regular healing, it's still pretty slow, but it goes up fast enough to kind of get me there. If I take another hit from this guy, I'll probably die, but I'm not going to lose much. That's right. Right? If I try a life gem, it takes me much longer to get to the point where I'm going to be safe. And I spend much longer running around healing, and in order to kind of get the healing up to speed to be comparable to how my Estus Flask was. And all that time, while I'm getting, you know, while I'm potentially getting pummeled, right? Or sorry, while I'm healing, when I'm waiting for that slower healing to unfold, to take effect, whatever, that's more time that I could potentially get hit again and then get stuck in this cycle where I'm like burning more and more life gems. If I just pop one Estus right here, by now I would be back at full health essentially. But now I'm still slowly creeping up, so if I'm at low health, it's really very risky to use a life gem unless I really remove myself from combat. Even now, you know. Yeah, see, like, I had one already active, but it's so slow that it's not going to just save me from everything that I get hit by. Oh, sorry, I'm catching up on some chats now. Manakun says Sailor Moon can anything you want, she's omnipotent. Oh, okay, I guess I didn't realize the full extent of her omnipotence there. Not that Kaguya, a different one from an anime called The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. Oh, I've heard of that, yeah. Isn't Kaguya just, like, in general, a character in either Japanese history or mythology or something like that? Like, the Princess Kaguya that was referenced in Naruto was not an original creation of Kishimoto. It was like a riff, like a iteration, right? And then Saitama says, oh, Kanokun says, Saitama is nowhere near omnipotent pro. He's a galaxy level fraud. Oh no, I more meant like, the way that his character is presented in the story is that he like can't be beaten by anybody that he fights, right? He always wins no matter what. And on the surface, having an idea of a superhero who just like is never really threatened by a villain whatsoever, seems like it would be kind of boring, right? Because where's the tension, you know? Naruto versus, I don't know, Zabuza is particularly exciting because Zabuza is so much more terrifying than him. Yes, sometimes it can be fun for Naruto to come in and just like clean house, but most of the fights he's in, he's an underdog, and that disparity, creates this tension of like, oh, well, how is he gonna overcome this challenge this time? Something like that. So if your character just like automatically wins, they feel like a Mary Sue or a Gary Stu, right? Where they're just written to be, without having any conflict. There's less opportunity for character growth, I guess. I see kind of struggling to think of a manga that doesn't have some sort of conflict in it and some sort of weakness or, setback that the main character has to overcome. So yeah, I was just curious if Sailor Moon is omnipotent, then what kind of struggle does she face? Does she fight other omnipotent characters as well? Saria says, I love this aspect of Dark Souls so much. It makes it so fun to talk about and learn about because there's just so many layers to it. Like, yeah, absolutely. And I think I kind of chafe against this idea a little bit, but there is this understanding in the community that the game was developed to purposefully have ambiguity built into it. And I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before, or probably heard it from other people in the community as well, is that when the director Hidetaka Miyazaki was a kid, he read fantasy novels in English, but of course he didn't, I guess I shouldn't say of course, but it just happened to be the case that he was not fluent in English. And so there were parts that he just could not understand with his level of reading comprehension at the time. And in English specifically. English comprehension at the time. And so he would get to a certain part of the story and then find a word that he didn't understand and not be able to really understand that part of the narrative. And so he would fill in the gaps and he'd be like, oh, okay, well, I think that, this knight was actually the bad guy, or I think that the dragon, was the one that burned the kingdom, even though all it said was the kingdom burned. And now this becomes a bit of a bone of contention in the lore community, because some people will then say, well, because of that, there are no answers to lore questions, right? The series was made deliberately to be ambiguous. Everything is ambiguous and unknowable, and you can basically have no valid conclusions. Everything is entirely subjective. I don't think that's really entirely fair. I think there are narratives that are pretty clear-cut. I think there are messages and intentions that are, being conveyed pretty clearly. But also, there is plenty of stuff that I think we're allowed to have lots of leeway in coming to our interpretations and understandings. I was just trying to be thorough going through here and figure out, make sure I get all the items and stuff. A sec. Okay. So, Dark Souls, Konakun says Dark Souls 3 theme, a slow decaying world that's near its end. Meanwhile, in the Elden Ring, the rise tarnished. Yeah, it is kind of nice to see, a world that's much more alive and in the process of actively, teetering on the brink, so to speak, as opposed to Dark Souls 3 has, plunged over the edge. Dark Souls 2 is very, very quiet, very faded, very muted. Something that I, was that I realized about about Bloodborne recently was that Bloodborne is really, really loud, especially Yharnam, the first area. Compared to Dark Souls 2, there's just not a whole lot of stuff going on in the audio mix. Let's just take a moment and listen. Now, granted, this is just one area, you know. Forest of Fallen Giants has more going on with the wind and stuff. This is a particularly quiet part of the level, so maybe it's a bad example. But at the end of the day, compare this to Yarnum, and it's just like constant noise, right? There are people screaming, and there are people crying, and there are people laughing, and there's blood curdling gurgling noises, and just you know, the whole city feels like it's actively dying, and that is conveyed through the audio in such an effective way. I do love these. I really love the playful way that they're playing with the placement of the petrified soldiers. It kind of keeps you on your guard, sets you up for those little jump scares. Konakun also says she holds back a lot because at the end of the day she's just a 14-year-old girl. Oh, so she probably doesn't actually want to like destroy the universe or anything, right? Oh, wow. That that scared me. I knew something was gonna happen. Oh, they're still going. Shit. So probably some interesting symbolism going on there with regards to Nashandra having, you know, or maybe not even Nashandra specifically. Well, yeah, Nashandra having a mask that you know, generates poison or whatnot. We got fire arrows, destructive grade arrows. Oh shit, okay. Yeah, so these guys are, you know, I remember saying before that I felt like those guys were a little disappointing when we encountered them elsewhere in the game, because they were meant to be these knights that were you know, part of the royal line or whatever, like defenders of the king, and we're just seeing them kinda suck when we fight them earlier. But now we get to see they are actually quite powerful, and they're chasing me. This is good. Notice how the poison kind of has me burning through quite a lot of life gems there. Interesting tactical space here, kind of forcing me to seek a vantage point. I'll try one of my dung pies out here. It's unfortunate. I think that their pathfinding is not letting them, or their facial restrictions are, god damn it, are not letting them kind of come down. Oh, that sucked. Because I think the idea here is that you could lead them back, but I also got to be concerned about them pushing me off the cliff. You know, I like this a lot. It's a very tense moment here. Obviously, like that huge shield and oh, can I push him off? Yeah, nice. That huge shield in that tight space there is a serious threat. Now I gotta figure out how to navigate this space. Oh shit, I didn't mean to use the Estus there. I'm using a specific kind of attack from my axe. Okay, let's use my life gem. Time to use bear powder. I just passed it. Nope. That's cool. I feel like I'm surviving, you know? I feel like I'm kind of going through the gauntlet here. The castle's throwing everything it possibly can at me, and I'm surviving. Feels very satisfying. I could go down there in the acid pool. Choosing to avoid that for now. Oh, I guess you could say the fact that oh, I'm at really low health. I gotta pay attention to that poison. The fact that I let myself get into that position in the first place is just due to the fact that I wasn't engaging with the petrification mechanic the right way, so to speak. In other words, I wasn't like actually being deliberate about my choices to approach each individual statue and have them unpetrify in the correct order or whatever. I was just being very careless about the way that I approached the room. So now this is one of the most intriguing and kind of I don't know, oddly unsettling things in the game that I don't have a great explanation for, beyond the fact that like Nashandra is obviously like a child of dark, and she brings darkness to the kingdom, the particular Dark Souls 2 brand of darkness. Obviously, it's a very dark painting. She's kind of silhouetted in shadow. Her hands being placed over her midsection like that, maybe you could stretch and say that it's a reference to pregnancy or something like that. But I don't know. I don't really get that. The hand gesture, from software do tend to use either mudras or like hand positioning to signify certain things. So I'm wondering if not that, then what it's supposed to convey. And I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't have a great analysis of it. But part of the fact that I don't actually, again, to me, adds to the intrigue. The idea that there is this painting that is associated with this character, and even though it's only a facsimile, only a distant, a pale imitation of the actual thing, that it carries so much dark with it that just being near it seems to like curse you, and inflict, not just curse you in the sense of like, oh, like you're cursed with bad luck. No, it inflicts a curse upon you that rots away at your very being. If you attack it, it does nothing. Also, the curse buildup is faster than anything else that we've seen apart from the Pursuer's Blade. So, or I guess like just dying. So I think this kind of sets the stage for Nashandra being somebody who has a hidden, and very terrifying and very powerful, menace to her. And then we're not going to fully appreciate that for quite some time. Oh, interesting. That's not good. Nameless Usurper is quite difficult if I remember correctly, so I have to be careful here. Oh, there's another... Oh, shit. Okay. Okay, that was close, but... it's okay. I can figure it out. Yep. So be careful about rolling here, too. So... go back down. Where did that other Cyan Knight come from? Cyan Knights are the armored ones with the halberds. I'll catch up on chat in just a second. I like the knife that she's got too. What the heck? Okay, that wasn't so bad. There's a nice little ambush there. But again, like, providing that you've been playing through the area carefully and mindfully, plenty of opportunity for you to create cover points for yourself, so to speak. Okay. Let me take a break and catch up on some chats here. There's a thing called the Galaxy Cauldron, says Konakun, which holds all of reality. Oh, well. Past, present, and future, and dreams inside of it. And Sailor Moon destroyed that casually. Oh, God. What happened to the universe after that? Or maybe you shouldn't spoil it. Maybe you should just check it out. Sorry says, I love the aesthetic of your character, by the way. It feels very much like something you might see in a CGI trailer for Dark Souls 2. Yeah, I think this is the armor set that wound up getting used for promotional material. And actually have like a little figurine of it that I found randomly. It was just like randomly in some store that I was in. I was like totally surprised, but it looks really cool. You can see the kind of like the fur pelt on the shoulder pads. Is that teal or is it more of a turquoise? Kind of accenting is really nice and something you don't see represented all that much in these games. Really does genuinely feel, I don't know, kind of oddly beautiful and proud, but also a little bit reserved. I don't know how to describe it. Mixture of the fur and the metal and the leather, just all those different materials and textures together, is really a nice kind of assemblage. Konakun says she also fights chaos, and chaos is the nothingness that existed before beginning and will exist after the end and fights that thing. Jesus, that's terrifying. I didn't know that. That sounds like some berserk shit. Didn't know that Sailor Moon was that hardcore. See, I gotta get over there. Again, so this level as well, just to talk about the level design a little bit, is pretty linear for the most part. It's a series of gauntlet challenges as opposed to something that's more traditionally open-ended or whatnot, right? Oh, here's the letter. And I think this game does get criticized for its linearity a little bit. So far, you know, I can't exactly say that this compares to, whatchamacallit? I can't say that this necessarily compares to, like, Central Yarnum, which I played through recently, in Bloodborne, in terms of branching pathways and interconnectivity and stuff like that. And I think if you were hoping for Dark Souls 2 to be more non-linear, or to have like more branching pathways and just more options for you to explore its spaces, then I can understand why getting to this part of the game, like this castle, and hoping for something that would be a lot more intricately branching and layered and using checkpoints and multiple bonfires and stuff like that, why that would potentially be disappointing. And I think I might agree with that. But I do also feel like having a series of challenges, kind of like, it kind of reminds me, maybe a weird analogy, but of like the chamber of the see, I don't even know, it's not the Chamber of Secrets. I can't think of the word for the analogy I'm thinking of, but there's like a sequence of events where you know, characters in a fantasy novel go through, I guess, like a Zelda dungeon, like I forget what it's called, but the Castle Hyrule in Ocarina of Time, before you go and fight Ganon and Ganondorf, right? You go through each one of the individual little mini recreations of the dungeons in the main game, and each of those isn't super non-linear, right? There are a series of challenge rooms that you progress through and then go to the next one. But overall, you know, I like that kind of series of compartmentalized challenges, and I think that this castle does a really good job of that.
You have fought admirably on your journey, cursed undead. I am Nashandra, Queen of Drangleic. A true monarch carries the weight of their souls. The last king of this land, King Vendrick, as he was called. He found the strength to rule his people, and when the undead were born, cursed, he found more strength to face them. But in the end, he never took the true throne.
I thought there was supposed to be music here.
Visit Vendrick. We have no need for two rulers.
Well, it's interesting, you know, this could just be me projecting or whatever, but it does feel like she almost feels like betrayed by Vendrick. Like Vendrick was supposed to fulfill a certain role and failed to do so, and she seemed to be genuinely either impressed by him or, you know, probably genuinely loved him, or at least admired or appreciated him to some extent, right? Because he was able to find strength and then find more strength again. It seems pretty admirable, but in the end he seems to have failed, and Nashandra seems a bit bitter about that. So but she's a little bit ambiguous about her wording, right? When she says we have no need of two monarchs, she could be referring to the fact that you're challenging the king, and maybe she doesn't think that's necessary, that she still views Vendrick as the king in some way, and that you're not really wanted here, or that she views you as the next monarch, or even that herself is going to be the next person to succeed, and maybe she doesn't know. Sorry. So, different ways to interpret this. Also, seeing like a large lady in a big cathedral as obviously a big part of Dark Souls 1's progression, and it happens around the same kind of point in the overall story. And this is obviously a very different rendition of what we see with Guinevere. But it's kind of cool to see. Again, Dark Souls 2 does this constantly, so it's not really a surprise at this point, I guess. But another example of the game. Alright, I wanted to find the binoculars. I can never remember where they are. Another example of the game finding a way to take a concept from the original Dark Souls 1 and then riff on it and twist it and warp it in a kind of interesting way. I keep thinking that they're here, but then not being able to find them. Okay, I don't actually want to shoot her. Oh. Just go into the boss fight. I think this might be a good stopping point after this. I'm pretty out of it. I'm gonna let myself use Estus if I feel like it for this one, though. Okay. Actually, shit, I should have done this first. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the twin dragon riders. What happens if I go over here? So that was not ideal. Part of the criticism of this boss from Matthew Matosis was that you have to constantly be like gaming the lock-on in order to like you have to, what was it, that the game really is designed, Souls games are designed to use lock-on combat against like single combatants, and it's really not meant to handle more than one combatant at a time, which I think we talked about before. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. The game has plenty of fights with multiple fighters at the same time, plenty of fights with one-on-ones, and I think this boss is a decent skill check without being too cheap, because like you've already fought this guy before essentially, so you're already familiar with his moveset, and so it's less of a like test of skill in the traditional sense, or a test of like placement and awareness and improvisation. And if you're like me, now granted I fought this guy before, if I see a guy who's like super armored with a strong polearm weapon, and I see a guy who doesn't have a shield and has a ranged weapon, I'm gonna read that as like, okay, the guy with the polearm is probably more vulnerable, is probably harder to defeat, especially since I have direct experience fighting him before. So I'm gonna go for the guy without a shield, right? How do I get to him? Well, I'm gonna ride over to him. I'm gonna use this big guy who has this big weapon to try and knock him down, or I'm gonna at least stand close so that I won't be in range of the arrows. Like maybe he won't be able to shoot me over the ledge or something like that. And so now what I was expecting is that I would come over here, and then while defending against this guy, I'd be able to like beat him while hiding from the arrows, like taking cover from the arrows. Or that he was gonna break the pillars and bring the other guy down. I didn't expect that the guy would just like casually, walk off the ledge. But that being said, I feel like this is a big enough open space. You should be familiar enough with at least one of the enemies here that you have plenty of opportunity to just like consider your tactical options and plan a strategy. And I felt like I could do that without being unfairly like mobbed. Compare that to something like the Copper Demon fight from Dark Souls 1. I felt pretty fair. This sort of treasure room is also interesting. No idea what that thing is, but it's pretty fucking cool. Sword piercing the sun or something like that. This pedestal over here. Again, it is kind of funny to me that they just have, like, I don't know, where the Dragon Riders like ransacking the castle and basically just piling all the loot here. Were they planning on running away with it, or did the king just kind of like leave all of his shit behind him before he ran off to the undead crypt or whatever? I don't know, it's kind of interesting. And there's our friend Ben Hart. So yeah, I understand that that's not like the best fight in the series or whatever. I guess it's a little cheap, especially given the distance away from the bonfire. I think most people won't find that bonfire kind of hidden at the wall on their first playthrough. And so that is a kind of a long run back. But I didn't feel like it was too cheap or anything, I felt like it was a nice way of reincorporating a previous boss and iterating on it. and giving you an opportunity to experience the same enemy, but also in a different light. But pretty well paced. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna catch up on chat real quick. Konakun, oh yeah. Oh, Hog Riders, yeah. I'm not gonna do the high pitched voice. But yeah, that's that made me laugh. It was such a confusing but also amusing little ad campaign for the Hog Riders. I think the idea was, like, in pre-production, they originally wanted those characters to be riding on something. They tried to put them riding on dragons or something like that, but they couldn't handle the tech because they wanted them to be able to detach from the riders. Like in Elden Ring, yeah, I think, who was it? Zuli the Witch found out that like in Dark Souls 2's files, there was an asset of one of these guys, or at least somebody else who was like riding a horse that would be able to detach from the horse, but they never like finished implementing it. And then they kind of reused that asset in Elden Ring, and it became the Kaiden swordsmiths or cell swords that ride on the horses in Limgrave and then jump off of them and attack you, something like that. Because they had always wanted to and struggled to figure out how to do like the detaching actor riding another actor tech, but they finally pulled it off years later. Konakun says, well, it's not like I will debate anyone on Goku versus Sailor Moon because I'm a pacifist now. I made an oath to myself that I will never fight anyone. That's probably for the best. Konakun then says, here's my top 9 female characters. Realist: Giselle from Fata Morgana, Konata from Lucky Star, Kaori, Your Life in April, or Your Lie in April, Kaguya, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, Aiko, Goodnight Poon Poon, Teresa from Claymore, Sachi from Goodnight Poon Poon, 8 White-Haired Girl, and Morgana herself. Okay, cool. That's quite the list there. I wish I could comment on it further. I don't know a lot of those characters, although I do intend on getting to Fata Morgana, just to kind of offer out some reciprocation. I will say I did like oh my god, why am my brain is just cooked. But I really like Heather from Silent Hill 3 as a protagonist. I think she's quite flawed and she's not exactly a hero, but she gets closer to that role by the end of the game, and sort of what she goes through and the courage that she has in facing what she does is pretty impressive. And it's trying to think of, oh yeah, basically like every female character in Arcane, but especially Vi and Caitlyn. I really like their arc and their narrative and their personality as well. I need to consume more things with like good well-defined like female characters. I haven't recently. I've just been playing a bunch of like dour, games in which people don't really talk much. There's some great female characters in The Boys. Starlight is pretty incredible. Queen Maeve to a lesser extent, but still. And trying to think about what. Oh, of course, Avatar. Been rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Katara and Suki, and even that's like the villains, like Azula is an amazing character as well. Oh, sorry, it says I forgot about those guys. Yeah, there's a lot of little hidden things in the data that people have found. I would highly recommend checking out that channel, Zully the Witch, Zullie, and she does some really, really great dives into the lore. And there's also, or into like I think she describes herself as a professional Dark Souls hacker. She basically like goes into the data and finds all kinds of cool secrets from the games across the series. There's also Bonfire VN who does similar things, and Illusory Wall in the same vein. Number 10 is Farnese from Berserk. Yeah, that's a really good choice. I would have I might put Shirka up there too, but Farnese or Farnese is a good one. Trying to think of some more examples when I'm more lucid. Sorry, I think you've probably done a video, and I'm just like blanking on it, on like different representations of Zelda, right? Like herself as a character. But I'd be curious if which version of Zelda you think is the best, like, character, period, in terms of overall personality and like agency and what she's capable of. And why is it Midna? Kidding. But with that being said, oh, Berserker and Horses for You, yeah, that was definitely a thing that happened. There's some moments in that series for sure. Still one of my all-time favorites, but man, it's gonna be hard to recommend for certain moments. Well, friends, I appreciate you stopping by and your patience with my gravelly voice and sneezing and stuff like that. I think I am going to call it a little early tonight just because I kind of want to go pass out for the evening. Hopefully I'll be, fit as a fiddle by the time we get to the Naruto stream on Sunday. I'm going to be continuing with Dark Souls 2 next week, of course. I'm working on the music stream. I've been listening to a lot of soundtracks from the Soul series, including the Bloodborne soundtrack, which is just absolutely fucking incredible, and I want to talk to you all about that soon. But first, Dark Souls 2. And yeah, this Sunday, I think we are going to be finishing up the Brutal Honesty Noodles video. And I listened to like the last third of it or so one more time just to kind of refresh the arguments, and I think I'm pretty set on what I want to say, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys think, what you have to say. So yeah, thank you again very much for stopping by. Let me know in the comments if you want me to cover anything in particular, or if there's anything you're curious about delving into in the future. And in the meantime, I hope you have a great rest of your week.